It's worth mentioning before we move into the study of the expressions that traditionally decans have been studied, which is the 10-degree batches. The first two expressions would be the first decan, the second decan would be the third and fourth expressions, and so on. It's also worth mentioning that Dane Rudyard really studies it in terms of the first three. In other words, the first half of Virgo is a bunch in itself. So you've got different ways of looking at this. We are taking the Rudyard approach because not only does he say that there's the outgoing, in other words, the first six signs, and the incoming, the second six signs, he's also looking at half of each sign, the same principle. And he's also saying that there are three steps of that first half. And I'm going along with that because I haven't found anything wrong with Dane Rudyard's worldview ever. And I take him to be a genius, so I'm not going to argue with his logic, even though I might not yet understand it the way he understands it. But I think it's good to have faith in someone, and I got faith in him. So I'm following his ideas of the expressions. What he didn't do that I have done is name the expressions. And that gives us much more of a handle on what we're talking about. And I'm willing to discuss these, whether they fit or they don't fit. But thus far, in all of my conversations, it's kind of worked, so we might have stumbled across something meaningful here. The first three: conviction, adaptation, and reorientation. We've gone through that. We find that meaningful. So we move now to the fourth: cultivation. And that is much more indicative of our traditional sense of Virgo. It's a very neat little game you can play with the association of qualities, in other words, cardinal, immutable, and elements, earth, air, fire, water. So, for example, if you take cardinal energy to be up and down, fixed energy to be fixed, immutable energy to be side to side, you can gain a huge insight into the meaning of a zodiac sign by knowing its element and qualities. So Virgo, which is earth and mutable, has a side to side approach to earthiness. How better could you describe vegetation? That's the natural inclination of vegetation, is to spread, isn't it? It's what weeds do. They just go sideways. Whereas if you, for example, you take cardinal water, for example, up and down, can you think of any water that goes up and down? Give you a clue. It responds to the moon's energy. That's Cancer, isn't it? The tide, fixed fire, the sun, Leo, cardinal earth. A mountain goes up and down, it's really neat. So I don't know if that's well known, but I use that frequently. Okay, so cultivation brings us into this Virgo sense of spreading earth, in other words, vegetation. And cultivation is where we are interacting with nature to make improvements from our perspective. It applies to one's own personality as well. The nature of one's personality can also be cultivated. Here's the text on it. Inner knowledge is brought to consciousness through experience of ourselves through others. Inner knowledge is brought to consciousness through experiencing ourselves through others. So inner knowledge is intuitive, brought to consciousness, externalization, because of our interaction with an outside agency. When guided, this knowledge is led out. That is education. True knowing occurs only as we find balance between thinking and feeling, doing and being, rising above attachment to either. We embrace our darker side occasionally, learning how to seek inner guidance and how to cultivate awareness between the profound and the false. We need to work at it with individual effort, and yet at times put immediate self-interest on hold in order to be part of a collective shared purpose. So that's our overview of what cultivation is. Now, if we look at the details of that, then we begin with the Virgo 16 energy of the orangutan. So this is the wildness within us. We're discussing cultivation here by beginning with that which requires cultivation. The ideal to which humanity aspires is described by words such as goodness, truth, justice, and loving kindness. Yet within each of us is a residual force of our primitive nature, the animal self, that has no sense of right and wrong, no conscience, and little or no self-awareness. Thus arises all conflict in the realm of human activity, both the inner ambiguities and the outer clashings and bangings that make the news headlines. Until we face up to this honestly and deal with it wisely, then there will be suffering. Now, I think that ability that Virgo has to just acknowledge that a part of the human species is just dark and wrong from one perspective. And they just put up with that, actually, in a pragmatic kind of way. Now, the image we have of Virgo is the perfecting and the perfect and the virgin and the pure and so on. And that's an aspiration that they have, but they are by no means lacking in earthiness. There is about Virgo a very definite common sense, down to earth. Let's face the facts of the matter the way they are. And I remember having my Virgo mother drum this home to me again and again and again, despite the fact that of all people on the planet, I really don't need it. Nevertheless, she felt that I did. We move on. Virgo 17 is a volcano eruption, a volcano eruption. So the wildness within us is no longer contained. And we have catharsis, not an energy you normally associate with Virgo. So it's interesting for us to see this one, catharsis. The earth has tensions that release by volcanic eruptions. In the same way, so too does the human psyche, occasionally blow off to release pent-up energies. Though this behavior is often disruptive and sometimes destructive, nevertheless, it is healthier than the alternative. Without it, the psyche would be in danger of catastrophic breakdown or falling into the frozen attitude of an automaton, slavishly obedient to imposed constraints. The third point is the Ouija board, intuition. Knowledge is not complete unless both the rational and non-rational aspects are considered. In the modern world, we can see that the greater emphasis is placed on scientific method. Yet, though a minority, esotericists have also kept pace with an evolution of consciousness associated with the more intuitive right brain approach. This image is rather outdated. The Ouija board, it provided guidance of a sort, yet could very easily offer silly or false commentary. If we consult an oracle, we are advised to be ultra careful to balance intuition with reason. The words of an oracle can carry surprisingly significant weight and could easily influence outcomes as a kind of self-fulfilling prophecy. So once again, let's sort of think about the Ouija board in the context of when it was delivered as an image in 1925. Very recently, the war had ended. There were still widows grieving by the million, and it was a popular thing to do at that time to try and find some comfort by intuitively messaging with a departed loved one. So that's the context in which a Ouija board was seen at the time. Rather more than a game, but rather less than the tarot, for example. The tarot has got a lot more gravitas to it. So is the I Ching, so is runestone, so is most other things. The Ouija board is actually seen more as a plaything, not quite a joke, but in that kind of realm. And so it's kind of a light-hearted approach to divination. And it's interesting with Virgo, I don't really get that Virgo has the sort of intense access to intuition that you might expect of the water signs, all three of them, for example. And even Aries has got this kind of strange ability to know things just before they happen. That's how it seems. They're so fast to respond to it. So I don't see Virgo as particularly intuitive. And interestingly, they've taken an intuitive system, the Ouija board, which requires a certain amount of pushing and pulling. So whenever I've used one several times, and every time somebody said, "Are you pushing it?" Every time, nobody really trusts a Ouija board. They all assume it's being cheated with. And I think Virgo's got that. They kind of they'll believe in their intuition, but they'll doubt it at the same time somehow without undermining anything. They can argue in two positions for and against the same topic simultaneously without seeming that there's any discrepancy. Like, or maybe that was just my mother, but I did notice it when I was a kid happening quite a lot. The fourth point in this expression of cultivation is 19th degree of Virgo, a swimming race. The role model. Pursuit of excellence is mostly associated with competition, yet the more advanced seeker tends to employ emulation as a more productive stirring to action. I have to say that I know this to be the ascendant of Ruby Fumizki. And when I was in conversation with her about her artistic works, which are on my website, and the Sabian Symbols, she saw herself to be tuning in to Elsie Wheeler, almost like a reincarnation of Elsie Wheeler. And so we have this, the more advanced seeker tends to employ emulation as a more productive stirring to action. So she was emulating, I think that's very lovely, isn't it? Swimming takes us to the water, here used as a metaphor to describe attempts to master the watery psychic realms. It must not be thought that only the gifted can access their deeper intuition. It is a natural human facility that we can all awaken and develop. And to do this, we may find it beneficial to emulate a more realized person, one who has opened the ability to see into hidden areas. Now, the fifth point, the automobile caravan. I should be asking Santiago to talk about this one, being as how it's sun sign. Cooperation. Going beyond personal ambitions of self-realization, we then seek out others on the same journey and align ourselves to a collective goal. Reality is a gestalt. What is real somewhere is real everywhere, as above, so below. So at the deepest reach of human consciousness, we cannot be fully realized until and unless everyone else is too. That's the bodhisattva vow of the Buddhist fraternity. They won't claim nirvana unless everyone can have it. Anyway, it makes good sense to share our journey because synergistic gains accrue and it's more enjoyable. So the orangutan, the wildness within us, the volcano in eruption, catharsis, bringing that some of that wildness out, the healing through volcanic release, the Ouija board. This allows us to tune in then to consult our intuition. That's really interesting to notice when we've got a load of rage and terror and powerful emotions. We can't really access our intuition very well. We have to clear that passionate level of emotionality out of our system in order to get in tune with the very sensitive issues. The first challenge of which is to know whether or not this communication is real or it's a cheat. The Ouija board gives us that question to deal with. And if it is real, then how do we interpret it? And that requires sensitivity. The swimming race suggests to us that instead of competition of a race, we actually find somebody to emulate. So the intuition that arises in the Ouija board is saying, despite the fact that dog eat dog is the apparent role model, the way to live in our society, crocodile consciousness, it's not. It's not the way to live. The way to live is to find someone to emulate, somebody whom you admire, become like them. I think it's worth mentioning that whom we admire is most indicated in the horoscope by the midheaven. That's our aspiration to become. And then we get to the Virgo 20, the automobile caravan image of doing it together.